When I yelled out to the entire village, saying, "What don't I know?" one of the men finally realized he had a pair, walked up, and explained to me that the full humans were leaving. "What?" I asked him. He explained they're actually worried they're too exposed where they are. They're unable to fully defend themselves without us being right up close, and they don't want to move us into their area, as we tend to scare the living bejesus out of a few of them. I remembered how one of them just pulled his 9mm and shot me in the plates. Good thing I was wearing them. Yeah, that would have hurt, and worse. Regardless, they also know that if they move us, then we can't work the farm if we're not here. Plus, many of us are still wary of the humans around here. And even though the human families live in this village, yeah, it's still tense as it is, and it'd get a whole lot worse if we just up and moved ourselves over there. Apparently, they'd been in contact with other human settlements, and they hadn't told us. When I heard this, all I could say was, "Oh, those assholes. We're supposed to be equals here. What the hell?" As it turns out, at first they were trying to set up simple trade relations. Unfortunately, poor terms made trade deals pretty much impossible. Many of the other settlements wanted complete control of the base, and that was not going to happen. They're just not going to surrender. What made it worse is that politicians had actually set up their children over time to take over, creating monarchs again in a more feudal system of governments than we ever wanted to even think about. After this next generation of spoiled rich brats began to take over, the cycle of civilization destruction began anew, and those on the base didn't want to deal with it. As he continued, my head was just spinning. I had to sit down. This was getting a little difficult to process, and this is a lot of changes real fast. After a few moments, though, he asked if I wanted to continue hearing what was going on. I simply took a deep breath and nodded. He continued explaining that the entire base was already in the process of packing up, and they're going to be leaving in about a month. As it turns out, they had an opportunity to broker a deal with another settlement, which was also military run and turned out to be an old National Guard base anyway. In about 3 weeks, cargo planes and convoys were going to arrive, and they would be bringing a lot of goods that we can use, in particular to trade for foodstuffs. And when I asked how much, he said, "A lot." How much is a lot? A lot of food. Let's just put it that way. This was the moment that got me very nervous. You see, my old strategic mind kicked in. I began twisting in my head all the different scenarios, thinking about the farm and compounds that make up our village. My eyes must have got really wild as everybody just kind of got quiet. When I jumped to my feet, everybody jumped back, thinking I was going to just pounce, and they looked at me and said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I need to talk to all the representatives. Now." After bringing everybody together, I told them my concerns. I informed them with any group, they're going to be after as much supplies as possible, and they might look at us as a threat. And in that case, they're going to want to take all the resources we have and take out any possible threats. I don't know what's going on. We've already dealt with folks who have decided to try to enslave us. We've dealt with folks who just straight up try to kill us all off. We can't take any chances here. Of course, everybody thought I was being paranoid. Well, not all of them. The others took my word to heart and started talking about this, to include a certain female reptilian. She, of course, was the loudest voice against dealing with any humans, period, but then again, she had lightened up a little bit now that she got some fat reserves in her tail for once. The truth is, though, the humans we know kept the others a secret. And why? Why would they do that? The humans we don't know are going to be arriving in a very large group as well, and their full intentions are unknown. Are they going to show up with goods or with force? Aircraft also means that they have fuel, and that means they have a lot of fuel on standby. They can actually produce it somehow at a quantity that allows them to bring cargo aircraft and a convoy through. That's something to think about. It takes us almost a year to get enough fuel just to go back and forth a few times from here to the base. The convoy also means weapons, heavy weapons, and a lot of personnel to protect it. This is not something to look at lightly. I got a bit aggressive as I was putting my speech in, and I had to pause and simply take a breath. I simply said, I hope when they arrive with goods and with good intentions. But if not, we need to be ready to defend ourselves at an absolute moment's notice, because believe me, something like this kicks off, it is over fast. Believe me, it is unbelievably quick. This is when a few of them started to look at me like, how would you know how a firefight goes? Don't worry about it, I said. I finished all my actions and talk with, trust is earned through actions. You all know this. And they all simply agreed with me, shaking their heads up and down, as since everybody fully understand that this could go either very well or very, very bad. It was decided that we would stage weapons close to each location where the convoy might come through, and we had to stay alert just in case. You never know when an extra group's going to be out and about. Maybe they have a recon group out already, although we would have spotted them by now. We would have smelled them, we would have seen them, we would have heard them moving, all that. So we knew it was going to be the convoy we had to worry about. At that point, once we were ready, it was a long 3 weeks, as waiting is the worst part. We couldn't do much except stage weapons and let people know, hey, don't touch them, don't mess with them, don't even show that they're there. It's best to deal with it through actions, and so we simply prepare. We prepare goods for trade as well, a lot of them. Vegetables mainly, and some fruits, and some fish, if we had excess of. They were not getting any of our beef. That was way too precious for us. Our arachnid friends were very quickly spooling up tons and tons of beautiful threads. I still don't know how they do it. Their arms and legs move so fast, it's freaky, but somehow they're able to take these huge spools that are twice as long as a football and only about 2 inches of a dowel, then suddenly fill it up with like 10 inches on either side of this nice thread that could be loomed, or maybe they even sew it up into some sort of sheet. It is incredible how they can do that. Yet every time they do that, they keep wanting to wipe me down with what they made. I keep having to back off. Ladies, it wasn't funny the first time. It's not funny now. On top of the food and the threads, of course, we need the threads for our mammalian counterparts. The wabbits, canines, felines, even bovines gathered as much of their fur as possible so they could trade off of them. This turned out to be very easy, and we got a huge supply as their winter coats were beginning to shed off. And thankfully, we got a hold of some extra brushes that make it very easy to get a lot of fur very quick. I mean, hell, we use a lot of this as well. What do you think my bed and pillow is made out of? What was surprising, but not too surprising, was the humans showing up from the base to give up items that they just can't take with them. Much of it is just decorative or barely usable for us, but we definitely don't turn them down and appreciate everything they're going to give us. Even if it's a niche product, sometimes you just need a certain product and it's nice to have. Some bring their children too, most of it for the first time to come see us, as this might be the last time they ever see us. I stay clear though when I realize this, as I tend to frighten children. I mean, seriously, would you want to sit there and look at an 8 to 8.5 foot tall lizard guy covered in scales, spines, and these claws and these huge wings? I mean, yeah, the kids around here like to hang off my tail, but seriously, a kid who's never seen me before tends to run. Thankfully, that's not so much of a problem with the female flyers, as they're very, very sleek. The humans from the base also hinted the idea of the humans in the village joining the Exodus. Only one family actually takes up this offer, as they were going to ask anyway. Shockingly, two human families from the base, along with three single adults, want to stay with us. They don't want to leave. Unfortunately, they're going to have to share a bit of housing until we build adequate numbers of houses for them, and that's going to take a while. Once we admitted we'd accept them, we had a small incident, at least I did, and it was interesting. Yeah, sure, let's call it that. The single adult woman that was moving in saw me and had screamed at first. I knew I was going to scare somebody. I thought I'd scare some kids, but when I turned the corner, she must have seen me with my wings out or something, and she freaked. I walked up and slowly introduced myself, and she went from fear to standing there looking me up and down like a well-cooked steak. Medium rare with just a little salt and pepper on it. As I walked away, she said something. I didn't hear that part. Then one of the males around, a canine I think it was, says, "He's taken already." And loudly she responded, "That doesn't bother me." Without turning, I yelled back to her, "It matters to me. Besides, I'm pretty sure you don't want to anger a woman with claws." With that, I extended my talons just a little bit to emphasize the point. I'm pretty sure everybody reminded her about a couple of my mates. Thankfully, that's the last I heard about that. The day before the first convoy was meant to arrive, the general actually showed up in our town. I got the call and headed out as fast as I could to go meet him. And when I came in landing with a thump on the deck, the general actually jumped along with the rest of his staff. He got up, holding his chest, breathing hard. "Oh, I will never get used to that. Whew. Take pity on an old man's blood pressure, will you?" Everybody thought that was funny, and once everything calmed down, we were brought tea, but the general wanted to be brief with our conversation now that I was there, and we were simply having to wait for an arachne to show up as a representative. She came in rather quick and very politely went with her hand right across one of the officers' chests. "I seen that smirk before. She's had him before. I swear to God, she wants him again." Once everybody was seated, the general called up on his staff, and he received a pile of documents and maps and gave it to us. He lowered his head a bit before apologizing. I'd never known an officer like that to lower his head. I swear he was doing that to make sure we didn't rip it off. As it turns out, they had been holding on to some unconfirmed reports. On the maps were points labeled with codes, and I wasn't sure what the codes were. He explained that these were all potential settlements of, well, they didn't really know. The majority are dozens of miles out, and most of them seem nomadic as they don't stay there more than a season. All do not appear to be humans, though, at least not full humans, he said. We let him continue speaking, but I could see red. Oh, that anger was coming in. Anger for not telling us. I thought we were allies. What the hell? I tried to stay as professional as possible, but clenching my teeth. "Why withhold this?" He started explaining in a low tone, and it turned out they were actually worried that we would get too strong and be a threat. I simply put my hand on my muzzle and said, "Oh, you're an idiot." I then explained that fighting the bugs together is more than enough to show our allegiance, to show that we are friends. I didn't get his intrepidations and things like that. After a quick berating, I looked over the documents, and as I did, my little female wingless dragon came over the side and pointing at a couple of points, she said, "This one's human. These two, These were us. Realizing that we could have aided in this and brought a whole lot more intel. I mean, hell, I could have flown to one of these in 2 days. It wouldn't have been a problem. As this was brought up to the general and his staff, it was at this moment the general knew he fucked up. It was at this point that we decided to just keep everything professional and we brokered a deal. In exchange for us contacting these groups, they would leave a stronger radio for us to call them if anything happens. Any humans we find, we will make contact with them and give them the option to join in wherever in the hell these guys are going. We'll call for an airlift. Any, we'll say, not so humans will be under our discretion on how to deal with them. This was a simple deal and it works out in everybody's favor, so of course nobody argued. At this point, the general did not want to stick around as he realized he might have just pissed us off. He was right. Although I still swear that Arachne was, if we weren't there, she would have jumped his bones. I mean, what the hell? I know she has a thing for blue eyes, but calm down, lady. I was in the air as a large convoy headed towards the base. I simply got on the radio, sent my call sign, said, "Yeah, convoy's here. Looks like they're rolling deep." I could see that the majority of vehicles were big rigs, buses, and with Humvees sprinkled in between them. I expected them to take a day in the base before heading our way, but nope. 2 hours after they entered the base, the convoy, not all of it, was heading our way. In the center of the convoy was something I was not expecting. I was amazed I didn't notice it before, but they were kicking up a lot of dust. There was a HET, a heavy equipment transport, with a Bradley fighting vehicle on the trailer. This made my pucker factor go up over 9,000. I realized they were using the HET to move the Bradley, as the Bradley just blows through fuel. Not as bad as a tank, but it's so much worse than anything else. So the HET was there specifically to get better fuel economy. Smart. They rolled right past the farm and straight to the village center. I watched real close as I wanted to see if anybody was going to jump off and do anything to my farm, because if they did, I was going to bring all sorts of hell with them. I was already gripping on my blades, getting ready to draw them. But nope, they just kept going. As they were getting closer, I could see there was a certain vehicle leading the way. It was a sedan I was very familiar with. After the convoy pulled into the village, a few people on the ground motioned on which way the convoy should actually turn to get everybody inside. I was way too high to hear what was being said, but their actions said a lot. I was joined in the air by everybody, to include the mayor's widow. It's the first time I've seen her flying in a while. I can tell that she hasn't flown in a good few weeks. She's breathing hard just to stay flying. But honestly, I even asked her to be up here. Not just because I didn't want her in the way, but also the fact that her hands could handle those pistols that she's gripping onto right now. We watched as those in the car got out, but most of the others stayed in their vehicles. I had told everybody on the ground to make sure that the convoy dismounts before they start talking business at all. In particular, use the phrase, "You're making the natives restless," and point up towards us, as at least a dozen of us are now circling slowly in the sky. I saw everybody slowly climb out of their vehicles, and then I heard a voice over the radio call us down. I said, "Not until they dismount the Bradley, too." Everybody on the ground seemed confused at a time, but then again, the one that seemed to be in charge, he simply seemed to have a defeated look on his face. This seemed to raise a bit of tensions as the Bradley opened up and 5 personnel climbed out of the back, all of them just packing a whole bunch of heat. Then the driver, gunner, and Bradley commander opened their hatches and slowly climbed out. I say slowly because I really couldn't tell. Usually climbing out of those hatches is, well, it's not easy. This turned out to be another few tense minutes as everybody stepped away from their vehicles and showed that they didn't have any type of violent intention. Only then did we slowly descend. As we did, I watched the perimeter and realized that we had halflings holding on to ammo, we had arachnes all around, we had felines right in position to pounce. If these guys wanted to do something stupid, then yeah, we were in perfect position to make sure they didn't walk out of here. Making very slow circles in order to not add any of the tensions, I actually landed on the Bradley while everybody else landed around, and immediately checked inside the Bradley to make sure everybody was out. As I stuck my head inside the hatch, I'm sure those on the ground got an interesting view of me with my ass up in the air. Satisfied to see that nobody was still inside, I jumped down and walked over to the officer in charge, the OIC. As I did, I noticed most of the soldiers were just amazed at what they saw. Here we're talking normally, being as cordial as possible, and yet, as one of them put, an angel had come down from heaven. I swear every time you call her that, she blushes. It is absolutely insane. And the kicker is, I don't know what the hell's going on with us, but she still looks like she's like 26 or 27, even after having a few kids. Standing in front of the OIC, I shook the colonel's hand and he looked very nervous. When he mentioned his name and rank, I simply said, "Oh, by the way, Colonel, before we start, could you kindly tell that idiot to put his weapon on safe? Things are tense enough around here as it is without an accidental discharge." The colonel didn't even have time to say anything, as you could hear multiple safeties clicking back on. I simply said, "Good. Now let's get down to business. I trust while we talk, your men will remain professional, sir." Using the military verbiage I was using, let him know that trying anything stupid will only win him a stupid prize. Along with that, he simply looked at me and says, "What was your rank?" I simply looked and said, "Don't worry about it." Once we were inside and we can talk in a more civilized manner, we gave a list of goods to each other. The list me and my folks were looking through included things like hand tools, such as saws, hammers, and such. There was also a small forge, of all things. We weren't expecting that. And a small excavator, something that would be very useful, but I couldn't get inside the damn thing. You ever try to squeeze inside something like that? It's already tight, and here, there's no way I'd get my tail in there. Last thing I need is that getting caught in the tracks. There's also some things like simple medicines like aspirin, but nothing too crazy, no antibiotics or anything like that. But at this time in life, it's really hard to get that sort of thing anyway. These did not fully impress, but something else did. We got towards the bottom and saw a full-blown solar system. They were portable systems designed for field operations. I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I had to hand it over and say, "Is this what I think it is?" They simply got big smiles and go, "Yep." There was also several pallets of bricks, pipes, and refined metals that simply need to be shaped. This will aid a lot. Our water system works, but it's very primitive and requires constant upkeep to have any type of hot water or flowing water for that matter. Now we can upgrade the system. It'll take only a couple months. The biggest piece that stuck out, though, was a large centrifugal generator. It needs work, of course, but we could truly use that. If we get that along with the small dam, we can now have constant power. The colonel was looking at us, and seeing the delight in our eyes, he simply waited for his paperwork to be handed back to him. A few of the staff had already looked, and they had wide eyes as well. The colonel took it, looked it over at the goods, and he was not fully impressed with what was there. That is, until he looked at the quantity. With this, he actually held it up and said, "Are you serious?" "As a heart attack," somebody said. One of the staff members said, I will need confirmation of this before I say anything, sir. There's no way they have this much." The mayor's widow simply chimed in and said, "We can simply take you to the storehouse if you would like." With that, we simply got up and went straight to the storehouse, as we have more than one. When we got there, we had to unbolt them and open the very heavy doors. This meant that the soldiers couldn't get in without our help. You could say it was a security measure, but it was also to make sure nothing got in here and destroyed what we have. As they looked at the piles and piles and crates full of supplies, we could see that they were taking inventory really quick and realized that we weren't kidding about our numbers. I simply stated, "Once your men help us offload your cargo, you can have all that these two storehouses hold." One of the general's orderlies simply said, "Sir, you're going to need a bigger truck." The soldiers waiting outside seemed a bit nervous that things were taking a little too long. I could almost smell the fear on them. No, fear wasn't the word. The anxiety that was slowly building up. They didn't know what to expect. All they knew is that everywhere they looked, there was things that could rip them apart. Then suddenly the colonel yelled to them, "Get everything offloaded!" As they immediately jumped to work, many of us went up to help. With tensions gone pretty much at that point, most of the village came outside to help. This surprised many of them as they didn't realize there were so many of us, but they didn't complain that we were able to lift a whole bunch of heavy stuff. The soldiers did seem a bit nervous working with reptilians like me, and of course our Minotaur, as our strength truly worries them. We're able to pick up boxes and crates that are taking 8, 10 soldiers just to lift up, let alone move. They keep looking also at the young ladies and stumble a few times as their eyes seem to take over as they're simply walking and staring at these ladies who are not wearing much at all. But let's face it, if you're covered in fur or a carapace or something like that, why the hell would you wear clothes? Seeing the reaction, though, the arachnate offered for the convoy to either stay the night or stop by the nest before they leave. Most of the soldiers screamed yes with their eyes. They didn't say anything, but they definitely wanted a piece of whatever was being offered. While we worked, a large meal was actually set up outside for everybody to have lunch. Everyone decided to take shifts for lunch because we didn't have enough room for everybody, and who was seated enjoyed a fresh meal being served by very attractive ladies, ranging from canine to feline to wabbits to halflings. Even elves were in this, and they were completely put back. As we enjoyed the meal and conversation, to absolutely no one's shock, at least no one in the village, a wabbit girl suddenly jumped over 20 feet in the air, screaming, dropping the plate she was carrying. Most of us jumped to our feet as she got to the ground and then ran and cowered behind our female minotaur. She then started to screech in fear as she screamed, "He grabbed me! He grabbed me!" The colonel immediately got to his feet and said, "Which one?" The sergeant major was right next to him, held up his hand as almost a way to silence the commander. I hadn't even heard him talk at this point. Then I heard his voice. "I want to know which one of you did something unprofessional." With no answer, he said, "Now, everybody goes hungry, I guess." Realizing that the entire convoy was going to beat the hell out of him and maybe just leave him as a heap on the side of the road if he didn't say what he did wrong, a teenager stood up and took responsibility. I looked and realized this kid can't be 16, 17 years old. Right next to him, a man with stripes stood up, smacked him upside the head, and as the kid ducked down, this NCO grabbed the young man by the collar and dragged him out as he was trying desperately to keep his feet under him. And it was clear that the NCO was pissed, and he wasn't the only one. A few others joined him, and they pulled the young man behind the het. Then they proceeded with some wall-to-wall counseling that everybody could hear. The smacks, the bangs, the curses, as they could hear somebody get smacked up against the metal and then kicked a few times. Then they brought him back. As the blood started pouring down his face, he was stood up in the middle, turned towards the colonel, turned towards me and everyone else. And the NCO looked at him and said, "He has something to say." With that, the young man apologized for his behavior. And then I simply said, "I'm not the one to apologize to." Sergeant Major simply looked at me and said, "He's right. You know who you need to apologize to." The man, keeping his head down, slowly walked over towards the little bunny, and she was still hiding behind the Minotaur. Now, two of them, who were actually very pissed, and proceeded to apologize profusely, as he simply turned around and said, "Sorry for ruining everybody's lunch." He simply walked away over to where his wall-to-wall counseling had actually happened, where a medic was standing there, simply looking at him going, "Oh, idiot." The colonel apologized to all of us, and made a point to apologize to the bunny herself, who was actually still shaking. She had been treated very bad before, and I told everybody to watch their manners or else, and I slammed my hands down, making a point, letting them know that I don't know where the hell you all come from, but there are many females here who have been treated poorly in the past by humans. The tone of the area completely changed. It wasn't a fun afternoon anymore. One by one, as they finished eating, the soldiers apologized directly to the bunny, who seemed to shake less and less as time went on. Even I went up and told her I was sorry. I told all the girls I was sorry. I should have said something before this incident, but she simply looked up, and it's the first time that the bunny had actually come up to me, patted me right on the jaw, and said, "It's okay." Thankfully, this brought me out of my rage that had been building up since the incident. The only reason I didn't do anything is I didn't feel like causing a firefight in the middle of the village. I was seriously on the edge of losing it before the soldiers settled everything in-house. But still, we're going to have to wash them. I would have preferred that they decide to pack up all their stuff and leave, but the convoy did end up staying through the night. Not due to the fact they wanted to spend some extracurricular activities, although I guarantee that happened. It turns out they just weren't fully loaded yet. There was so much in the supplies, they thought that we were just going to trade a couple items and then they were going to leave with a whole bunch of our food. Yeah, that didn't happen. Before going to sleep that night, a bunch of us were talking with the colonel. As it turns out, they did the math and they didn't have enough room inside the trucks they brought. And in order to take the rest of the supplies, if possible, they would like to trade the Bradley they had sitting up there. That way, they'd have enough room to take everything with them. As everybody was jumping at the chance, I simply held up my claws really quick and said, "Well, hold on. One thing, though. Do you have somebody who can teach my folks here how to start it, how to drive it?" The colonel? Well, he just smiled. In the morning, the Bradley was offloaded, and boxes and crates of goods were strapped down onto the trailer. We did everything we could, but our amount of rope is limited, to say the least. Thankfully, they had a whole bunch of ratchet straps that they could use, but still, everything was stacked as high as they could without it falling off the side. It took longer than expected due to most of the soldiers not getting any sleep the night prior, though the Arachne seemed to be in a very good mood, surprisingly, and so full of energy. I wonder why that might be. Before they left, there was one last surprise. Our local elves had been able to grow a multitude of berries in their section over the years. In fact, that was their main source of trade. They ended up giving a couple barrels of their berry wine they made to the soldiers as a thank you for all the supplies. In particular, one of the solar systems that they were going to be taking with them. We had already signed it over. This will be their way out of the quote-unquote dark ages for them, and they couldn't be happier. It wasn't long before the convoy actually headed out once everything was secured, double and triple checked. As they left, I saw them go past the farm as I headed up over top, and saw them link up with the other half of the convoy and prepared to head back to wherever in the hell they were coming from. I could see off in the distance the cargo planes coming in a staggered column as they do. Seeing that, I knew it wouldn't be a good idea to fly over there and see if there's anything we could help them out with. After the birds loaded up and left, the convoy moved out right after them. As they left, us flyers decided to do something. We got in formation and were right over the convoy, just a little bit ahead. And as they sat there and got onto the main highway, we all popped flares as a bit of a salute and a final thank you to them. Seemingly in response, a couple of the Humvees simply popped flares as well. It was nice to see them, even though they were simple star clusters. Once the vehicles were gone, it just seemed quiet, though. Not that we ever got a lot of noise from the post or anything, but it just seems empty around here. It's odd. Maybe that's a new sixth sense we have. I don't know. All I know is that now that the post is clear, there's only one question left around here. Since we have been simply surviving at this point, and now that we're thriving, now that we have power, we're going to be able to have hot water, we got fire on demand. Oh, this is going to be nice. It may be time to expand and find out who, or in some cases what, is out there. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you for joining me on Chapter 35 of They Call Us Monsters. Before I go, I need to send out some special thank yous to some of my supporters, and those would be MTF Guard, Erica Gem, Guardian Sage, SS Demon, Brian Kemp, Sir, Chris Dixon, and Cause Lynn. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntax, ejecting.